Recognition, power, and influence is your birthright, and this podcast shows you how to get there. Welcome to episode number 230. Today's episode, I am interviewing Hady Méndez. Hady is an advocate for Latina women in leadership. She has held leadership roles at various different tech companies, and she is a huge champion and supporter of bringing more diversity to the leadership table. In today's episode, we talk about some of the specific challenges that women face in the workplace and how you can begin to overcome them, and also how companies can support and advocate for more Latina women in leadership. It's a great conversation, so let's get started. Welcome to Women Changing Leadership. I am your host, Stacy Mayer, and I teach you how to get promoted, get paid, and bring your whole self to the leadership table. I am on a mission to change organizations from the C-suite out, because women are the new face of leadership, and we are doing it on our terms. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Women Changing Leadership. I'm your host, Stacy Mayer, and super excited, as always, to be here with you again this week. As you know, I'm always looking for incredible guests to bring on this podcast, and sometimes I don't actually know why I am drawn to a certain person, except for the fact that they just have amazing, big, bold, badass energy on LinkedIn. And today's guest is one of those women, and I can already tell, even just from our introduction, that we're going to have a lot of fun today. Hady Méndez is a Latina speaker and ERG coach. That's Employee Resource Groups coach based in New York City that works with ERGs looking to take their efforts to the next level. She is the founder and CEO of Boldly Speaking LLC, a company that is transforming the professional experiences of women and people of color by empowering underrepresented employees with the skills to self-advocate, self-promote, and capitalize on leadership roles within ERGs and throughout organizations. Hady, thank you so much for being here.
I'm excited to be here, Stacy. Thanks for having me.
So the first question I always like to ask people, just to dive right in, is what are some of your own personal secrets to success?
I thought you were just going to say secrets. I'm like, oh my, I don't know.
Give me all your secrets.
The secrets to success. Oh gosh. I actually just wrote a chapter in a book about this topic. The book is called Awareness Put Me On. And the topic is about, I guess, two things. One is some mindsets that I had to release, that I had to let go of. So I feel like that has been a secret to my success, is letting go of things. And I'll give you an example, like a belief. I had a belief that if I worked hard, I would be rewarded. And you and I know that it's a little bit more complicated than that, and that you could actually work really hard and not be rewarded, and you could not work as hard and be very rewarded. So I had to let go of these beliefs. So I feel like that is one secret to success, is letting go of beliefs that don't serve me. And that has allowed me to then adopt mindsets. And, you know, one of them is like an abundance mindset. Like, it's like, there's enough for everyone, and we're going to help each other, and there's power in community, and, you know, we're going to lift as we rise, and like that mindset. So I feel like letting go of limiting beliefs, adopting mindsets that are really powerful, having community and leaning on the community, knowing when to ask people for help, knowing when you might need to step back a little bit and like kind of give yourself a hug and take care of yourself because things are hard and you just kind of need a break. So I think those have been some of the things that have been really helpful to me on my journey.
Sounds like great words to live by. I need to adopt some of this, but I also know that's also how you ended up on my podcast. Is I have been following you for the past few months, and then you put a post up that just said, hey, I want to be on basically more people's podcasts, but specifically you said something about people who weren't necessarily women of color inviting you onto their podcast. And I'm like, I'm a white woman who is very committed to advancing women of color in the workplace. But I'm also very clear that I have bias as a white woman, and I have certain privilege as a white woman that women of color don't have. And so as soon as you did that post, basically asking, boldly speaking, saying, hey, anybody want me on my podcast? I was instantly like, yes. And then here you are. So that's a fantastic example of walking the talk and actually what you teach women to do as well. So I applaud you for that. And hopefully it'll be a very informative episode for my guests. So thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. And I appreciate you accepting the challenge. I want to say that I've done over 20 podcasts and you are the first white woman who's ever interviewed me.
Oh, that makes me sad. That's sad. Something that I had to add in, you talk about limiting beliefs. And I think that the first is the acceptance that we have limiting beliefs. And why do we have them? Because people tell us. People tell us at our workplace, work hard and get rewarded. Like, this is not something that we as women made up. We have been told this over and over and over again. And another limiting belief is that audience happens organically. So let's say, for instance, so I run a coaching business where I help women get promoted. By accident, I will have an enormous amount of white women in my programs. That is just like what will happen because people like people who look, think, act, and talk like them, and then we just show up. And I realized early on that if I wanted to invite women of color into my audience and to show them how I could support them, that was something that I had to actively do. And I was up for that challenge, and it's been an incredible journey. But when I go to a room, with another coach and I look around the room and everybody looks exactly the same, I'm like, that doesn't just happen. That's because the coach didn't actively go out and recruit or even just open their heart and say, hey, this is a welcoming environment. So, I know we're really kind of patting each other's backs to say, hey, thank you, Stacy. You're the first person who's had me on your white woman who's had me on her podcast. And I'm saying thank you for even noticing that, because this is something that I actively go out and try and do and support all women to advance into the executive level. So,
yeah, what you're talking about sounds like the intentionality. And I think that is so important because it doesn't happen by accident, because you're right. My circle of friends is likely to be kind of have things in common with me, just like your circle of friends might. And that's kind of like the natural tendency or thing that would happen. So then we have to intentionally invite and figure out ways to bring other people into our circles and into our world.
What are some more ways? I mean, we just gave a great example of just asking. So you put the intention out to ask. I have the intention to accept, and then we create a collaboration. So what are some other intentional ways that we can be more inclusive?
Like you said, when you walk into a room, notice who's there. That's for everybody. Notice who's in the room. Maybe notice who is there for the first time or who might be the only person in the room that's like them. So if you notice that, maybe you could be a little extra friendly and say, oh, Hady, it's so nice to see you here. I'm a membership lead for a networking organization, and I make a point as the membership lead to make sure that I say, welcome to everybody, but especially the new members. We're so glad you're here. You belong here. You're welcome here. I see you type thing, and I celebrate you. So I do think noticing is a big one. I think another thing you can do is amplify the voice of another. So if I'm there, maybe I'm the only Latina in the room. Maybe I'm a little bit uncomfortable. Maybe I'm a little bit nervous about speaking up. Maybe this is a new meeting to me. Maybe I just got promoted and this is like a new circle of people that I'm not really familiar with. And I might be a little bit intimidated or have a little bit of imposter syndrome. It's nice when someone invites me into the conversation and says, what do you think? Hady, what do you think? Let's include you in the conversation. And that's a nice way to invite people to participate and for other people to even notice they're there. I had a manager once that was really interesting, white sales leader. And I made a comment. I gave us an idea. It was like a brainstorming session. I gave an idea and everyone was like, not so good. And that's okay. Not all of my ideas are gems. Only some of them are. So we moved on to something else. And then maybe 10 minutes later, he's like, I want to come back to Hady's idea. He's like, I kind of like it. I think we can build on it. And then all of a sudden, the idea was good because he said it was a good idea. Maybe a little bit of his street cred, and all of a sudden, and he credited me for the idea, which I appreciate, because how many meetings do you not get the credit for the idea? People just repurpose your idea and don't even credit you for it. So he gave me the credit. He said, let's come back to that. Let's build on it. And then we walked away. That was the basis for our plan moving forward for this customer we were working on. And I, as someone who that doesn't happen to very often, I made sure I thanked him. And so that's the other thing. It's a give and take, right? It's like mutual. So like, I feel like from my side, I like to show appreciation for when someone does go out of their way to either amplify my voice, give me credit, give me recognition, include me or anything. I want to reward that behavior and say, thank you so much that, that you didn't have to do that. And I'm glad you did.
Yeah. So I assume you probably have more examples of this, either being the giver or the recipient of this type of behavior, this type of inclusion, somebody noticing you and lifting you up. Do you have any examples of either? I mean, I know it could be quite vulnerable, but either that happening or not happening earlier on in your career.
Oh, there was a lot of that happening. That's for sure.
Yeah, the not happen. That's what I was figuring as I was answering the question. I was like, it's probably more the noticing that it's not happening.
And I think a little bit of that, like I said, I'm going to take credit, not in a good way. There's a saying in Spanish. So I'm going to teach you a little Spanish, Stacey. En boca cerrada no entra mosca, which means bugs don't fly into closed mouths, which that's the literal translation, which means be quiet. Just, you don't have to say anything, because if you don't say anything, you might not say the wrong thing. And I grew up in a household where my mom used to say that. Boca cerrada no entra mosca means just like, it's better if you don't say anything, because if you might say, if you do say something. And so when I was in a lot of meetings that I was invited to, and I was invited to the meeting, so I belonged there. I was on the invite list, these were my peers. But I sometimes still remain silent because I was like, I don't want to say the wrong thing. I don't want to either disagree with someone and get punished for it or get called out for it. I don't want to come up with a bad idea that people are going to be like, what are you even thinking about? What is that? Where'd you come up with that from? I just didn't want to show any vulnerability. So I was like, I'm going to keep quiet. And maybe that's the best way for me to kind of survive, so to speak, in this environment. But it also was so, as you can imagine, harmful to me because no one knew what I was thinking. No one knew that I was trying to get promoted. No one knew that I was trying to get ahead. No one knew about my good ideas because, like I said, they're not all good, but some of them are actually good. No one got the benefit of that. As a Latina, I'm obviously bring a different mindset and perspective, but I never brought that to the table. For so many years, I just zipped it because I felt like that was the safest thing to do. And, I think some of that is generational as well. So it's like a lot of things. Some of it is cultural. Some of it is generational. There was a really good class that I took a couple of years ago called I Am Remarkable. I don't know if you've heard of it by Google. It's a class that's designed for women and people of color and even LGBTQ plus people. And it's all about how you should be self-advocating and self-promoting. And I never did that. So I had to learn how to do that.
And, one of the processes that I've been working with women in the last couple of years on is sort of unshaming this. So what I mean by that is, we had the voices that from our parents that told us to keep quiet and then, do as we're told. Our voices of our bosses all the years, work hard, you will be rewarded, all the things, all these other voices. But what we also experienced, unfortunately, is that when we did speak up, we were also shut down. There are many women who have had incredible problems and difficulties because our path is very, very different. One conversation that just burned into my memory and created so much fuel for my fire in the work that I do was a conversation with a white managing director. And I think he was being very genuine. He was like, why do you specifically only work with women? Aren't they just the same? They just have to do the same thing that we all do. We have to be good at our job. We have to speak up. We have to build relationships. All of those things are true, but there is something different when we're speaking up that we have to understand. And so much of the work that I'm doing is both working with women to find their voice, but then to find their confident voice that actually allows them to be heard. Because we know that the rest of the room isn't hearing us until, and you nailed it on the head, until somebody else in the room says, hey, let's go back to Hady's idea. It's a great one. I want to explore that a little bit more. And so there's actually more to it there's so much more to it. So I'd love to talk about that for a minute. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I would say that my response to people like that is there's a lot of data. Go back to data because that's pretty black and white. I would say there's a lot of data that shows two things. Men don't like women who self-promote, and women don't like women who self-promote.
Yes, exactly.
So it's like nobody likes it. So it's like, and somehow right. Doing it. It's like, what contortions do we need to be put into to actually say, be confident? And like you said, have that voice where, you know, we might be the only in a space, but we're still going to speak out. Or maybe we have an unpopular perspective. And that's kind of the value of having a different kind of person in the room, is that they might think and see things differently. But then you got to be brave enough to say, be contrarian and maybe disagree with someone who is more powerful and more experienced than you. That doesn't mean it's a bad idea. That not at all. It just means that, you know, you might see things from a different point of view. And oftentimes that's where innovation comes from. That's where like the next big idea could come from, is just seeing things in a different way. And how much do we miss out by not creating safe spaces and psychologically, this psychological safety that people need, that they can speak out and not feel like they're going to get punished, or not feel like someone's going to hold it against them, or not feel like everyone's going to look at them like they have three eyes or horns coming out of their head. Like, it's just like, I should just be able to do that. And people should be like, well, that's interesting, you know, say more. Or, I think we tried something like that. It didn't quite work because of these reasons. Maybe we should explore some other stuff. But it's like that type of thing, like really take us seriously.
Exactly. And as you were talking about psychological safety, I was thinking about the role of ERGs and these women's organizations. And when I first started out my business, I wasn't necessarily on the mission to specifically get women promoted. That was something where my heart was. But I was like, I have these skills that help people get promoted. Like, I was like, I know how to get people promoted. It can be one for all for one. And as I started to transition into group programs, I realized that it works well one-on-one if I'm just working with them by themselves. But without the psychological safety of the group, and there is something about having people who have like-minded problems and challenges that they're facing, creates that psychological safety for them to be able to explore in this safe container. And I realized as a coach that it was my responsibility to create that safety for the women in the room. And when I had men in the room, it just didn't feel as safe. I was just noticing they're not speaking up. And I'm like, hey, this is a program you paid for. Like, speak up. Like, this is safe. This is not your boss. But that psychologically, when you see that, we have been through the trauma, we know. And so as a coach, I've also really tried to create these safe spaces for people to explore. And I feel like ERGs also create that inside of workplaces.
Yeah, I want to share a funny story with you related to this, and then maybe we could talk about ERG some more. But the funny story about psychological safety, I started a reverse mentoring program at my job. And then so it was like women and people of color were serving as mentors to senior leaders, which all happened to be white males. And so that was the context. And then we were having a meeting where everybody was talking about their experience so far. And it turns out that we didn't get a lot of feedback from the mentors, which would be the women and people of color. Like, they just didn't give a lot of feedback. But the mentees, the white males, were like, this is great. And it's a great program. And it's like this. And we should be doing this other thing. And they were just like really jazzed about it. They were really excited, but we just weren't hearing from the other people. So when I checked in with them, they all were like, we didn't get a chance to talk because they wouldn't let us talk. Like, they just kept talking. And like, I tried raising my hand, but like everybody, they just kept talking. And so I had to go back to senior leaders and I said, hey, for the next meeting, you all have to have your computer on mute, and you can't talk until every single mentor has had an opportunity to say something first. And it was funny because as we were having the meeting, they were like, eh. And I was like, you can't talk. You can't talk yet. Put yourself on mute. And I had to tell them to put themselves on mute until every person, woman and person of color, had a chance to say something. And once we exhausted that they had given all their feedback, then we allowed for the managers to come in and give their feedback.
Oh my gosh. Wow. I can see this playing out in real time. And that is such a profound reminder. That's absolutely incredible. And I'm so glad that you were able to provide that space. It's so interesting. It's
and I was like, stop it. You got to be quiet. You can't talk yet.
You know, and the other thing is this diversity and inclusion as an agenda item. And that's sort of what I'm hearing in that example is that these senior male leaders are like, yes, we really champion diversity. But it also becomes, they take it on as part of their platform. This has been in politics for ages. So it's part of them getting to the top as opposed to helping the actual women get to the top.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I feel like they would definitely had their hearts in the right place.
Right. Exactly.
Fantastic. They just were not noticing, because sometimes you don't notice that you're not even including all the voices that you're so excited about including. So it's like
including. Exactly. And sometimes I'll share this and people will think, oh, well, I don't think they were malintentional. I'm like, no, unconscious bias is unconscious, right? We don't know. But I just appreciate these conversations, like bringing it to the forefront. And it requires somebody like you to actually step in and say, okay, we're going to put everybody on mute. That's the leadership that we need. So yeah, let's continue with the ERG conversations and some of the ways that you work with ERGs, both to create psychological safety, but to also help the advancement of women.
Yeah, I mean, I would say ERGs, they're community spaces. You know, that's how they started. That's the history of ERGs, is building community, giving people safe spaces, especially for people, I think, from underserved communities that maybe join a company and like are not aware of these unwritten rules. And then it's like, how do we, do this thing? How are we supposed to X or Y? And it's like, oh, you do it this way, that way, the other way. So I feel like for me, it has served that role in a very meaningful way. Like usually that's how I learn to navigate an organization or learn like what's okay and what's like the culture like. I learn about it through the ERG and through other Latinx people. Usually that is how I navigate. But I would say ERGs, they're organizational leaders. Oftentimes they're not recognized as organizational leaders. And I try to really work with ERGs leaders to step into that power because they have a lot of influence. They're culture builders, they're D&I advocates. They're, like I said, helping to build community. They are champions. They are organizational leaders, and they should be set up in a path for success in that recognition of the work that they do. And, that doesn't always happen. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done there. Likewise, I've almost always been part of women ERGs in my work life. Sometimes it's gone better than others. I would say those spaces, they're often dominated by white women. And, that's not a bad thing. It's fine. Like, I like the opportunity to meet and work with lots of different people. But it's just something for people to be mindful of, because oftentimes it's a blind spot. And it's just like people don't even notice that everybody looks like them. I would say the superpower of D&I practitioners is to bring that lens into everything they do. And it's like, once you see it, it's like really easy to see it, the pattern in a lot of places, but not everybody has the ability to do that. So sometimes people don't notice. You probably heard me say that a lot today, like noticing things and then intentionality. Because once you notice it, then you should do something about it. Take an action that is going to kind of course correct, but you got to notice it first. And I think that is a lot of where the failure points come in. People don't notice these things. So they need other people there to be like, hey, I don't know if you noticed, but X, Y, Z, B, D, E.
Yeah.
Let's change that.
I want to talk a little bit about the organization that you worked for right before you started your business. And so I know a bit about Salesforce. I'm also a big fan of Salesforce and the work that Mark Benioff has done to create equal pay and across the organization. I am curious from you, when you first started working for this organization, was there a choice on your part, or was it just like, oh, I got a job at Salesforce? Or was there a choice to actively work at an organization that, and I don't know about the inside thing, and I'd love to hear from you if you felt included and so on. But at least from an outward-facing standpoint, it seems like they take very active efforts to support diversity and inclusion at all levels of their organization. So I'd love to hear a little bit more if that was something that you actually thought about, or if you felt excited to work at an organization like that.
Yeah, I definitely did feel excited to work for an organization like Salesforce. They have a whole Office of Equality. They have a Chief Equality Officer. There are an army of people working on like diversity recruiting efforts, like that type thing. They work a lot with bringing in summer interns from lots of different places. They have lots of great partnerships with organizations like Latinas in Tech, as an example. They show up at Afrotech. They do a lot of recruiting there. They check lots of boxes in terms of like, they're doing all the things. They have a partnership with the Hispanic serving institutes and historically Black colleges and universities. They have a pretty extensive program with them. I mean, they just have like lots of great initiatives. So yeah, I was recruited into Salesforce. So I was working at another tech company and I got recruited to move there in a role that was not a DEI role. And so it was a customer facing role at that time. And so I was really excited to work there. And I ended up very quickly joining the ERG called Latino Force. They have like over a dozen ERGs. And so I joined Latino Force here in New York City. I ended up becoming like the head, one of the co-chairs for Latino Force. I joined the women's ERG. I ended up becoming the intersectionality chair for that group, which was a nod to we need to be including more voices in the conversation. I ended up becoming like a senior leader for the Latinx ERG. I ended up becoming an executive sponsor. And then all of that to say that I ended up in a DEI role as I ended up pivoting completely my career. So I went from customer facing to really employee facing. And I was the head of equality for Slack, which was a company that Salesforce acquired, I think back in 2021, if I'm not mistaken. And then I was helping the harmonization process. So yeah, it's a great company doing a lot of great things around equality, as they like to call it. That's their term for DEI is equality, and it's one of their values. And there's a lot of tech companies doing a lot of great things, and there's so much opportunity for there to be doing more because it's still single digits in terms of Black, Brown, Indigenous. Like there's a very, very low representation of lots of underserved communities are very low represented in tech. And then when you look at the intersectionalities or like senior leaders, like a Hispanic woman senior leader in tech, it's like 0%.
Yeah, not even. Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
that's 5. It's super, super insignificant at this point. So there's so much opportunity there still.
Yeah. And one of the reasons I was asking the question is because I do feel like more women, and especially as they get higher and higher in their careers, they have choices for which organizations they work for. And so when they see that equality is promoted across the board and they feel like, oh, I actually look at the website and see how many women of color are actually on the executive team before I decide to join. I think that's a huge, like, do they walk the talks? And I was always very curious about that because I get to see Salesforce very much from a marketing standpoint. They're a brilliant marketing company. So you have to understand that some of this is true desire and wanting to really genuinely advance more women into senior executive leadership positions. So yeah.
That's the game. It's a combination of recruiting, representation, and then retention by way of really advancement opportunities. And so you got to pull the levers, and some of it is the pipeline, but then like people come and it's like, it's not that cool here. I'm not talking about Salesforce anymore.
Yeah. In general. Right. Yeah.
You can be really good at diversity recruiting and get you in the door. And then you're like, but there's really nothing here. I don't really feel supported. I don't really feel like I belong here. I'm the only Latina in like my whole team or department or something. And it's just like, oh, this just feels like hard. Or we talked earlier about the psychological safety. This is one of our values, but it doesn't feel like it's a value because every time I've disagreed or provided a different point of view, I feel like I get like the cold shoulder from senior leadership. And it's like, I don't know if it's really safe for me to have a different perspective and to share it here. So I don't know if I'm going to hang around for very long. Or guess what? The guy who started after me got promoted before me. I know because I have access to the dashboard that we're performing pretty on par. Usually there's enough transparency that you can see that. And it's like, okay, listen, let's just look at data. Let's just look at numbers because that's the role I was in. And I could see this is a true story now. I'm not going to name names. I had a peer who started after I did, who was a white male, who got promoted before me. And when we looked at the numbers, they were very comparable. And that's frustrating to see and experience. And that'll make you leave a company quicker than I don't know what. There's no sense in hanging around a place that just is not going to value and celebrate you. Life's too short to hang around in places like that. So I would definitely advocate for people to try to work within an organization. And sometimes there is work to do and you can be part of the solution. But when you notice that things aren't changing, you reserve the right to find a place that's going to treat you better.
I love that. And so now looking at your work that you do with Boldly Speaking, do you specifically work with individuals on helping them find their voice? Do you continue to do work at organizations? Tell me a little bit more about your process.
Yeah, it's kind of all of the above. I definitely still work with individuals. I do a lot of work quite frankly, for free, especially with young people, because it is for other people to learn from my experience. So I don't want to hold out on sharing that information and helping kind of lift people and get them through. I don't want people to experience the things that I experienced because it wasn't fun. So that's one of my goals and objectives. The other is to really help organizations tap into their talent that's right there in front of them. And it's like, these are your ERG leaders. Surely 99% of the skills that they've developed are transferable into, a job that you pay them for. So why not into the talent that's right in front of you? And these are people that are fully invested, very committed, loyal employees, very passionate about being inclusive. What a great manager some of those people would make. What a great team lead some of those people would make. Why not tap into that talent? My work is that. And then also just helping ERG leaders in general to go beyond being just a space for community, because that's important. And I would say that's always going to be the job of an ERG, is to build community and hold space for community concerns and issues. But they can be a lot more than that. They can be very much aligned to the business. They can contribute a lot to the bottom line. They can really connect the business with the community. They can be other things. And I want to help them to achieve all of those things and measure it and show their value, because I think that's what's going to get them to some of those other advancement opportunities.
So I'm just going to ask straight up, what am I missing? Anything else that we need to be having a conversation about here for women of color, for Latina women in the workforce? Anything?
There's one really important thing, and it's about, I mentioned the word mutual before, and I'm going to repeat it, and co-creating, because I do feel like sometimes I have gotten a lot of mentoring and coaching from white men and women. I haven't always received an invitation to be a partner. And I feel like I have 30 years of experience. I have done so many things. I could definitely partner with anybody, and I could co-create things. And I think I could be a good collaborator. I could be a good thought partner. I feel like I'm also able to coach other people, including non-people of color. Usually people of color ask me to coach them, but I can coach anybody because I have 30 years of experience in a wide range of roles and companies. And so I just wish that I was invited more to be a partner and in mutual relationship with other people, because I think I can provide that value. And I know that there's so many of us can. And that's an invitation to just say, think more broadly about what we bring to the table. I can talk about a lot more than just DEI. Obviously, that's something that I love, and I'm always happy to do that. But I can talk about a lot of things. And I like saying that. I can talk about customer advocacy, or program management, or I don't know, anything. I have skills. And so, I can teach people too. And I wish that more people saw my value. And I say this because as someone who's a speaker, last year, I would say 90% of my income, my revenue came in during Hispanic Heritage Month. It feels like people only see me and see my value from September 15th to October 15th. And I argue that I provide value all year long about lots of different things. And I wish more people saw that. So it's an invitation.
Yeah. I mean, it was funny because when you were talking about working with organizations from the inside out to help them recognize talent, and then I was thinking about the work that I do, all I saw was co-creation, right? I was like, she gets them from the inside. I help the women themselves advance their communication so that they're actually communicating like an executive leader, because I do find that there is a bit of a discrepancy. I mean, we take gender bias aside, that a lot of women haven't actually been given the skills that you said, the unwritten rules, all of the different things that they can do to communicate beyond the numbers. So their numbers are on par. And then how are they showing up every day? Is it like that next level leader? And that's the work that I'm doing. You're over here showing, hey, we've got this talent. And then I help them interview. I help them actually get the job. And then now we're changing the leadership table. I was like, woo.
Yes, we need to. There needs to be more co-creation and collaboration.
Yeah. Oh, my God.
I think we're working towards a lot of the same objectives.
Yeah. So good. All right. So anything else for a woman who is looking to advance into those higher levels of leadership? Anything else that you would like to share to her before we head out today?
I would encourage you. We talked a lot about community today. It's definitely one of my core values. I feel like community is everything. These are the people that are going to hold you up, that are going to remind you of who you are, that are going to hold up that mirror and say, no, that what that person said about you is not true, and remind you of who you are. part of what I've been guilty of, and I think other people too, is like you believe the false narratives. You believe everything everybody says about you.
Right.
Like, oh, I don't know. You know yourself best. So maybe there's like some inkling of truth and some feedback you might receive, but be the owner of your story and your narrative. And also surround yourself with people that can remind you that's your superpower, Hady. Like, if someone's calling you a disruptor, like in a negative way, but that's your truth teller. Don't let people twist it on, don't let people twist that you're so good at and that make you who you are. So I feel like know yourself, own your narrative, and then have that community that just reminds you of who you are and all the great things that you bring to the table.
Hady Mendez, everyone. How do we find you online? How do people connect with you if they want to learn more or work with you or co-create?
Yeah, co-create. Yay, team. I'm on LinkedIn, so Hady Méndez, Hady on the web. That's like my Instagram account or something like that. I'm on Threads as well. And then my website is Boldly Speaking LLC, Limited Liability Corporation, bolddyspeakingllc.com. And yeah, I would love to explore some partnership opportunities, some opportunities to co-create. It would be my pleasure and my honor to do that.
Thank you, Hady. Thank you so much for your wisdom today and for sharing so vulnerably. I really appreciate you and all the work that you're doing. Thank you. Before you go, I have a question for you. Do you know how close you are to your next promotion? Really? Not what your boss has told you, not what you even believe to be true, but have you actually taken the time to sit down, take an assessment, review the 5 categories that it takes to get promoted into senior executive leadership positions and decided where you fall in each category and given yourself a ranking on a scale of 1 to 10 of how close you are to getting your next promotion? Have you done this? Well, now's your chance. If that feels interesting to you and you're like, hey, I want to know exactly how close I might actually be or how far away you might be and what it's going to take to get you even closer, then I invite you to take my promotability quiz. This is a quiz that I put together with practical tips that actually tell you where you're lacking and where you're winning. What are the areas that you actually need to improve and not necessarily what your boss is telling you all the time so that you can take concrete steps towards landing that next promotion and changing the face of the leadership table. Go to yourpromotabilityscore.com to take your free assessment today. Yourpromotabilityscore.com and let me know how it goes.